Thank you. And sir, you can put the PPT on the screen.
Yes, sir. Just a second.
Slide number 4. Friends, first of all, let me express my gratitude to WMTV, the association, for giving me this opportunity to share my thoughts on one of the most important topics and one of the most important aspects of the GST laws, and for that matter, any taxation laws, and that is show cause notice, the period of limitation, and other nuances of the litigation. Tomorrow, I will be also covering in a full session the appeals revision and other related provisions also. I would not like to hurry today. If anything is left out, I will also continue tomorrow. If today, at the end of the session, if I'm unable to deal with the questions, we can always, those questions can spill over tomorrow. I will deal with those questions tomorrow also. Friends, Swapnil just mentioned about this seminar and my giving some finishing touch. It was nothing, it was very well conceived, litigation focused webinar, which took, the idea must have taken jumps in Swapnil and other is colleagues' mind long back. This is the need of the hour, and this type of litigation focused webinar could not have come at a much better time. It's a need of the hour, because one thing is very sure, that the moment things normalize, and let us all pray that they normalize very soon. One thing is, there is another pandemic which is going to hit the taxpayers and the tax professionals, and that is the litigation pandemic, particularly in GST. So it is imperative that the participants and those who are connected with this must have a better idea about the entire litigation aspects. The litigation is a ban of the taxation laws, particularly in India. It is something indispensable. We are very litigation prone country. And as this graffiti says, litigation is a machine which you go into as a pig and come out of as a sausage. The only thing is that the sausage is actually enjoyed by the tax professionals, maybe with the grilled sandwich or with the pizza or whatever they may like to eat. It is the taxpayer who gets converted into the sausage. But we have to go ahead with it. It's not a very happy state of the affairs to be in, but it is inevitable. Next, please. I hope I am now clearly audible.
Yes, sir. Yes, you are audible.
Okay. Yes. Next, come straight to slide number.
A little bit louder, sir.
Yeah. Come straight to slide number 10. As I said, the tax regime in the country has always been dispute riddle, whether it is direct tax laws or the indirect tax laws. I'm not bothering you with the pendency of the cases at tribunals or high courts and Supreme Court level. The causes behind the tax disputes are known to everybody. Vague and poorly drafted tax legislations, arbitrary interpretation, frequent amendments, departmental officers always changing the revenue targets and creating the disputes, confusing clarifications by both the boards, conflicting judicial pronouncements, frequent amendments. These are the known causes for the mounting litigation in this country. Next. However, in a short span of 4 years, the number of litigations and the number of disputes with the GST regime it is unparalleled, in my opinion, in my 30 years experience. We have never seen such a frequency, such a mounting litigation in such a short period of time in excise, service tax, and even for that matter in customs. What are the reasons? It's a different subject, it's a separate subject by itself. But reasons are actually, apart from the whatever reasons I have narrated in the previous slide, this is extremely badly and poorly drafted law. One of the worst drafted laws ever one could come across. And that's why when the model GST law came, the 4-part series which I had written in Tax India Online, I had given it a title, Model GST Law, Is It a Horror Show? And this horror is now becoming the daily part of our life. Unfortunately, not much was done on the model GST law, and substantially it was converted into the final law. And now we are all paying the price for that, taxpayers particularly. Excessive delegation. There is an arbitrary interpretation. The another major reason, and before I say this, I understand there could be many revenue officers who might have joined this webinar today. I would only say this: whatever comments, whatever observations, and whatever views I express, my thoughts I express, they are not meant to hurt anybody. They are not personal. I am first a citizen of this country. Then I am a tax professional. So there is nothing personal in this. If somebody feels my comments are a bit harsh, or I will actually tender my apology in advance only. The state GST authorities' unfamiliarity with the finer nuances of litigation, we will see that how it actually hurts everybody. The very concept of show cause notice is embodied in section 73 and section 74 in GST law. Practically, such concept was almost like missing under the state VAT laws. So basically, they are at loss. And what is this mean? What is actually meant by the show cause notice? I am sure my learned predecessor speaker, Mr. Vinay Saraf, Advocate Vinay Saraf, must have touched upon this on the show cause notices. Then the wide-scale tax frauds, which are leading to stringent action. Most of the time, these stringent action are like a knee-jerk reaction only. I'll just try to hold this. Please let me know if I'm very clear, whether my voice is very clear now or not. So,
sir, you are clear, but the still a bit louder is required.
Okay, fine. Now, if you see, one of the classic case of the knee-jerk reaction is Rule 36(4). It is absolutely ill-conceived. It is an orphan child without any parents, and therefore, but why it has been done? Because of the suppliers' returns not getting, the supplies not getting reflected in the GSTR1, and you are actually then punishing the buyer. So the tax frauds, GST is a fraud-prone tax. Not only India, world over, all are suffering from this. But the type of action are being mounted, and the manner in which it is mounted to combat these frauds leaves much to be desired. From the beginning, GST has been, the design and structure has been extremely ill-conceived, and frequent amendment, that is the last bane of this law. One would have by now lost the count how many times the rules have been amended. Fortunately, the sections cannot be so easily amended, but even though those sections have also, the parent has also undergone so frequent amendments. So these are the major disputes where we are seeing the tax disputes, mounting tax disputes on a day-to-day basis under GST regime. Next. Tax litigation process normally covers these stages: assessment, show cause notice, adjudication, appeals, revision, prosecution, compounding offenses. Those two are not compulsory. Those two normally on the case-to-case basis in a given case. But these are the normal litigation-related process. When I talk about the assessment, let me clarify. And this is one concept, misconception which I would like to clarify to all the participants. There is no assessment as is understood in income tax in GST, or as is understood, as was undertaken under the VAT laws in GST. All the returns which are being filed by the taxpayer, whether GSTR1, GSTR3B, GST, or any other returns, those returns are not going to be assessed and will not follow by an order of assessment from the jurisdictional officer. So there is nothing like there was no assessment process even under service tax. There was no assessment process even under central excise. This has been go by right back in 2000. When we earlier, the taxpayer SSC used to file the classification list, price list, etc., RT12 return, monthly return, which were being assessed by the jurisdictional range officer, and the assessed copy used to be sent to the SSC. Have you ever received an assessed copy of ER1 return, or have you ever seen the assessment copy, assessed copy of the ST3 return? No, ST3 return also. Similarly, GSTR1 will never be assessed and the order, it will be given to you. Hello? Am I clear now?
Yes, sir. Yes, no issue. Please continue.
Okay, fine. Yeah, because I'm reading some notes. Fine. So therefore, one has to be very clear about this, that there is no assessment process under GST. All the provisions relating to assessment cover different situations, but on a monthly basis, whatever returns are being filed, or on the the quarterly basis, if the returns are being filed, then there is no they are not going to be assessed. So please remove this misconception from the mind. Next. SOCOS notice, basic provisions and principles of law. Let us start with this now. The provisions relating to SOCOS notices are contained in section 73 and section 74. And the machinery provision, the procedural part is covered by rule 142, machinery provision. Now, what are the causes of the SOCOS notice? If you read section 73 or section 74, it starts with, it says that where it appears to the proper officer that any amount of tax has not been paid or short paid or refund erroneously granted or input tax credit has been wrongly availed or utilized, then the proper officer may issue a notice, may issue a notice to the person concerned, asking him to show cause as to why that tax amount specified in the notice should not be recovered from them, along with the interest under section 50, and why the penal action should not be taken. So in that case, the causes could be tax not paid, tax short paid, refund erroneously granted, input tax credit wrongly availed, and input tax credit wrongly utilized. Now, if you see, as we will see later on, that all these practically this section 73 and 74 are patterned on section 11A of the Central Excise Act and section 73 of the Finance Act 1994 relating to service tax. Coming to the authority empowered to issue SOCOS notice. Both the sections start with where it appears to the proper officer, and then the notice can be issued only by the proper officer. Who is the proper officer? Proper officer has been defined by section 2, subsection 91, so as to mean proper officer who has been assigned that function by the board, by the commissioner in the board. And if you refer to the circular number 3/3/2017 GST dated 5th July 2017, one would find that for the purpose of SOCOS notice, the proper officer is the superintendent of the Central Excise and GST. It means right from superintendent level, the higher officer can issue, right up to the top one can issue. However, in GST, it is expected that majority of the SOCOS notice, or in cases, SOCOS notice will be issued by the superintendent only. In other words, the only officer which is lower in rank than the superintendent is inspector, and inspector of GST cannot issue the SOCOS notice. So this circular lays down who is the proper officer for the different purposes. Like for issue of the summons under section 70, again, it is the superintendent, he can issue the summons. However, for that matter, superintendent audit cannot issue the summons when he is undertaking the audit. But superintendent, jurisdictional superintendent, or any other superintendent or SIO, special intelligence, senior intelligence officer who is equivalent in rank of superintendent, SIO in DGGI, he can issue the summons. Next. Monetary limits for issue of SOCOS notice. Friends, some of you, quite a few of you might be aware about that board had laid down certain monetary limits under the excise and service tax for the purpose of issue of the SOCOS notice. That beyond certain, if the amount of tax which is proposed to be demanded goes beyond certain limit, then the notice will be issued by the higher officer. And this is how the things had moved. In the context of GST, by circular dated 9th February 2018, board has, apart from the proper officer who has already been assigned and designated by circular dated 5th July 17, board has also fixed the monetary limits for the purpose of issue of show cause notice and designating various officers in the hierarchy depending upon the amount of demand involved in a show cause notice. And that raises the first question. If an officer issues the show cause notice under section 73 or section 74, which is in excess of monetary limit, will it become invalid? If a superintendent is not empowered to issue the show cause notice beyond say 20 lakhs, but if he issues that notice, will the notice become invalid? In Power Chemicals case, Supreme Court has very clearly said that the board's administrative directions cannot curtail or cut short the jurisdiction vested in the officers, and therefore this might be an irregularity, but it will not invalidate the show cause notice. Friend, before I come to the limitation period, I'm just touching upon certain fundamentals. I'm sure this might have been undertaken by Mr. Vinay Saraf. I'm sure about that. But just to, set the platform when we take up the limitation period, closure of proceeding and other aspects today, I thought it necessary, that we may touch upon certain fundamentals of the show cause notice. So these are few slides I'm devoting to these established principles of law. A show cause notice is a condition precedent to a demand. And this has been laid down, and I'm referring to all these judgments, which are these are the celebrity judgments. These are historic judgments rendered in the cases of, in the context of the excise, service tax or customs. And because there is almost the provisions relating to demand, recovery, show cause notice of GST are pari materia with the erstwhile provisions of section 11A and section 73 of and other recovery related provisions of the Finance Act or Central Excise Act, the principles laid down in all these judgments will continue to be valid and applicable. It will apply on all fours, even under GST. We may have to. One thing here I would like to make a comment here. I am finding continuously that we have started looking at, people have been looking at the GST as if it is an alien piece of legislation, as if it has been somebody from the Mars or Saturn or some other, planet. They have just embarked upon, the Earth, Mother Earth, and they have imposed this law on us. It is not so. Fundamentally, the basic character of this law is the same as it was in excise, service tax, and to some extent in VAT. Certain major provisions have also been patterned on the Customs Act provisions, like valuation. Otherwise, this is not a new law as such. We have started looking at this law with a different colored glass. Otherwise, the scene is the same. And we have to keep this in mind, because we are undertaking too much of hair splitting, too much of interpretation, and as if we are actually interpreting the law, trying to understand the law for the first time. So this principle, a condition precedent to a demand, this has been laid down by the Supreme Court in Gokak Patel, Madhu Milan Syntax, and metal forging. These are the celebrity cases, 3, and these have been followed. There are quite a few others. I'm only giving you the main judgments. In fact, in Madhu Milan Syntax, Supreme Court has even gone to the extent of saying that a post facto show cause notice will not validate the demand. If a demand has been issued first and thereafter it is followed by a proper show cause notice, the demand earlier raised will not become validated. This is what and now here I'll take a pause that if the audit, I have also seen that taxpayers have developed a tendency to call every communication from the department as a notice, whether it is a summons, whether it is a simple letter asking for the information, whether it is some letter asking for the demand, like this tax has been shortly paid, or you have ITC wrongly availed, or transitional credit has been wrongly availed, kindly make the payment with the interest and penalty and inform the payment particulars. Audit raises a lot of objections. These objections are conveyed to the taxpayer either by the audit or through the superintendent, jurisdictional authorities, wherein under each observation, the amount is quantified normally, and then taxpayer is asked to make the payment with interest and penalty. These are not the show cause notices. These are simpliciter communication, may have a demand, may not have a demand. This is not binding on the taxpayer at all. If taxpayer does not agree with the stand taken by the department, then taxpayer can always put his say in the matter, and taxpayer can ask for the regular show cause notice under section 73. I'm not talking about section 74 at all. So section 73, he can ask for this. So please, we should stop, viewing every communication coming from the department as a notice. That notice word has to be actually used only as a show cause notice. Psychologically, it will make a lot of difference for everybody. Because client तो phone करके हमें बता देंगे, अरे सर जरा आप आ जाइए ना, एक notice आया है. And when you go there and look at, either it could be some simple letter seeking information, or it could be a summons or anything, but they are not notice. Next. Statutory mere letter or communication asking for payment is not a show cause notice. One can refer to metal forging case. I've given the citation in the previous slide. That one single case, Sidwell refrigeration. In this case, the demand raised by the audit, based on the objections raised by them, was declared to be not a show cause notice by the tribunal. That audit para is not a demand. It is not a show cause notice. Next. Essential of show cause notice. Show cause notice must be in writing. A oral show cause notice, there is no provision, whether it is section 11A or section 28 Custom Act and now section 73 of the CGST Act, a show cause notice has to be in writing. Oral show cause notice is not valid. Can the show cause notice be waived? This is an interesting question, that whether there is a provision for the waiver of the show cause notice. Can I say that I don't want show cause notice? I will put my representation. Incidentally, in Verco Steel case, 141 ELT Supreme Court has said in the context of the custom case that show cause notice is an individual right, and therefore an individual can always forgo the show cause notice, can waive the show cause notice. But this judgment of the Supreme Court was in the context of the section 124 of the custom case, Custom Act, and this is relating to the confiscation of the goods. Where the party had waived the show cause notice, there is a specific provision for that, for waiver under section 124 of Custom Act. There is no such provision was never a provision under excise or service tax, nor under GST. Incidentally, in a National Cooperative Bank case, the party had initially made the payment of about 54 lakh towards service tax, 52 lakh, and then later on they raised their protest that this payment was not, their liability was wrongly determined. Therefore, the closure of proceedings, they are not opting for it because their liability is coming hardly to 6-7 lakh. They had sought the demand of 44 lakh, refund of 44 lakh, I beg your pardon. Department did not agree. Department says you have already made the payment and you have sought, you have also, there was a closure of proceeding. We have accepted the payment along with interest. Now, there is no question of show cause notice. This was all accepted. Karnataka High Court overruled the department objection in the stand in this case. This is a very interesting and very important case. Principle will apply under GST as well. And where High Court has said that the party had raised its process, party had not signed the form, which was actually department wanted him to sign for the purpose of closure. And therefore, show cause notice under section 73 of Finance Act was a mandatory requirement. It was inevitable. Incidentally, in this case, Karnataka High Court has even distinguished Supreme Court judgment in Verco Steels. And finally, by board circular dated 1997, board has very clearly said that the show cause notice provision waiver, which is there in Custom Act, otherwise invariably show cause notice should be issued, and particularly where the substantial stakes are involved and the matter is complex, show cause notice should be invariably be issued. This all principle will continue to be applicable under GST. Notice must contain all essential details. I will only refer to this one of the most apt observations of the Supreme Court in the Vrindavan Beverages case. Supreme Court said, the show cause notice is the foundation on which the department has to build up its case. If the allegations in the show cause notice are not specific and are on the contrary vague, lack details, and or unintelligible, that is sufficient to hold that the noticee was not given proper opportunity to meet the allegations indicated in the show cause notice. And these observations and what Supreme Court has said will be applicable on all fours even for the so-called notice under section 73, for whatever, on whatever ground it is based. A taxpayer is not expected to assume the case of the department. I need not enter into, as a taxpayer, into the guesswork, into the imagination, and enter into the mind of the officer, what he would have meant and what he would have liked me to understand, that what is the case of the department. The case of the department has to come into black and white in the show cause notice only. Taxpayer need not presume the case. And if notice is vague, that itself becomes a ground for the challenge to the show cause notice. Similar are the, the observations of the tribunal also in Bikhala Dwarkadas and Mehta Pharmaceuticals. Next. A show cause notice cannot be based on the assumptions and presumptions. This is one of the most frequently referred to judgment. This is again an historic judgment of Supreme Court of Sugar Mill. It was a case of clandestine removal, suppression of production and clandestine removal based on some hypothetical calculation undertaken by the department. Coming to, should show cause notice indicate the amount demanded? This is very interesting. If you see section 73, it says the proper officer shall issue the notice to the concerned person asking him to show cause. Basically, that is the meaning, that why the amount specified in the show cause notice should not be recovered from it. The word used is specified. However, similar terminology had been used. The language of section 11A of excise, section 73 of the Finance Act, and section 28 of the Custom Act is also the same. Amount specified in the notice. What happens if the amount is not specified? Will the show cause notice become bad in law? This is the question we have to ask ourselves. In Bihari Silk case, larger bench by 3-2 majority held that mere non-mention of the amount in the show cause notice will not invalidate the show cause notice. The tribunal relied upon the Delhi High Court judgment in Hindustan Aluminium and Madras High Court judgment in JBA Printing Inc. where they have distinguished. JBA Printing, Madras High Court had said that the non-mention or the wrong mention of the statutory provision will invalidate the notice. However, again, the same view was taken by the MP High Court in a Gwalior-Royan case. In my humble view, the view expressed by the minority in Bihari Silk case is the correct view, that if the amount is not specified in the show cause notice, it will be bad in law, that notice becomes invalid, ex specie invalid. Because what section 73 or erstwhile section of excise says amount specified, it does not speak about the amount determined. If you carefully see, there are also principles of law laid down relating to the determination of the tax under section 75, which we will be seeing after a while. So there is a difference between amount specified and amount determined. First, there has to be the specification mention of the specific amount and the computation basis, and then after adjudication process, it is determined by the proper officer whether payable or not, and if payable, how much it is payable. And therefore, if the show cause notice lacks this essential detail of the amount demanded, then in my opinion, that show cause notice becomes ex specie invalid. Next. Show cause notice issued under wrong provision. Again, there are contrary decisions. In NB Sanjana, Supreme Court said that if there is a wrong mention of the provision, it will not. It was a case of Rule 10A versus Rule 9.2 of the erstwhile Central Excise Rules 1944. However, similarly, in Supreme Court, in BSE Broker Forum case said, this was another case in corporate laws, where they said that if the powers to issue show cause notice can be traced to a particular provision based on the discussion made in the notice, a mere wrong provision cited in the notice will not make it invalid or bad in law. However, in another judgment of Supreme Court in Anup Byers, it has been clearly laid down that if a particular penal clause has been invoked and penalty is imposed through the adjudication process on another penal clause which was never invoked in the show cause notice, then that is in violation of the principles of natural justice, and it will be actually not valid. It is a penalty imposed without authority of law. This becomes important under GST as well because of the multiple penal provisions which are there with a number of clauses, like 122 itself has a 21 clauses. So this becomes extremely important that a specific penal clause is cited in the SOCOS notice. Issue of corrigendum or addendum to SOCOS notice. Sometimes after issue of the SOCOS notice, the department officer may issue the corrigendum. The question arises whether this will invalidate, whether this should be treated as a fresh SOCOS notice. If the corrigendum is only for the purpose of correcting some error or mistakes or technical in nature, then it will remain corrigendum. But if through corrigendum or addendum, if the very basis of the SOCOS notice is changed or it creates a new ground, then it will be a fresh SOCOS notice and period of limitation will be counted from the date of the corrigendum and not from the date of the original SOCOS notice. In Kasturi Foods case, the very basis of the demand was changed by actually alleging another classification through the corrigendum instead of the earlier classification based on which the demand had been raised. This was held to be, this corrigendum was held to be a fresh SOCOS notice by the tribunal, and based on that, the demand was held to be time barred. Similarly, in Ahuja Radio Tribunal said, if there is a material and major change through the corrigendum, it cannot be simply considered as a corrigendum. It is a fresh SOCOS notice only. And friends, understand, the moment the issue of fresh corrigendum being treated as a fresh notice comes, the limitation period will come into play. Sometimes the corrigendum may have been issued after a long period, maybe after 1 year or 2 years. And the very time bar nature of the demand will then become important in the context of the corrigendum issued. Next. Period of demand. With this background, with this platform, now let us take the step forward and come to the SOCOS notice in the context of period of limitation. Next. First of all, what is the need for the limitation period? Why there should be limitation period for the issue of any SOCOS notices proposing any recovery of tax, interest, penalty, etc. in law? Answer is very simple. Initiation of the recovery proceeding cannot be an open-ended scheme for the department. After 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, department cannot suddenly wake up and say that if 20 years before you had actually evaded or not paid the tax correctly. So it is always a customary thing to find a specific time limit for reopening the assessment. If I use your terminology of income tax, reopening the assessment, there is a specific time limit. And that is why, because it actually extends the certainty, stability, and succor to the taxpayers. Otherwise, the taxpayers would always remain under that hanging sword of anxiety and uncertainty that when the department will knock at his door and start issuing bill and raise the demand. And this fundamental principle is embodied under Section 73 and 74. Section 73 provides for the SOCOS notice for the normal period of limitation, as is generally described, and Section 74 provides for the issue of the SOCOS notice for the extended period of limitation under certain specified circumstances. And how it is being done, I'll come to that. Next. We'll just first deal with Section 73. Section 73, SOCOS notice can be issued under Section 73, invoking for the normal period of limitation, and then when any tax has not been, the ingredients of fraud or willful misstatement or suppression of facts with intent to evade tax are absent in the case, then a demand can be raised for the normal period of limitation. If any tax has not been paid, may be bona fide under mistake of law or by wrongly interpreting the classification entry or valuation related provisions or under exemption notification, but without any mala fides, then a proper officer can raise the demand for the normal period of limitation. What is the normal period of limitation? We will see in a while. Here, there is a non-payment of tax or short payment of tax, or even the refund might have been given erroneously to the taxpayer. He might have availed wrongly the ITC, say in violation of Section 17, subsection 5, which contains the exception or exclusion from the eligibility to ITC. He might have taken the ITC, say, on the motor vehicle or any expenses relating to motor vehicle or food and beverages or on club membership. under bona fide misunderstanding that these are ultimately used for by him for the business purpose. Or he may have wrongly utilized the ITC. In all such cases, if the ingredients of fraud or willful misstatement or suppression of facts with intent to evade payment of tax are not existing, then normal period of limitation will come into play. Next. Now, first of all, the issue of so-called notice is mandatory before any demand is raised or recovered from the taxpayer for whatever reason. Recovery, the reason is not important. No amount can be recovered from the taxpayer without issue of the so-called notice. Please hammer this in your mind. Gokak Patel, Madhumilan Syntax, Metal Forgings. It is must. And that so-called notice must specify the amount of tax or ITC. That so-called notice shall also propose to recover, should also mention the recovery of interest under Section 50, and notice should also propose the levy of penalty under the provisions of the Act. That why the penalty should also not be issued. Even though that is a normal period of limitation which is available, there is no mens rea, there is no guilty mind, there is no, the fraud or suppression. Still, the levy of the penalty may get attracted. Validity of this we will see later on. So this is the notice which will be the fundamental. Such so-called notice should contain the basis on the which the demand is raised. Elaborately, it should contain, and it should also contain the computation detail that how the demand has been worked out by the officer who has issued the so-called notice. If the details are lacking on any of these, it is the taxpayer's right to ask for those details. And depending upon whether those details or basis in what manner it is conveyed, it will have a further bearing on the proceedings. Next. What is the time limit prescribed for what is known as a normal period of limitation? The time limit which is prescribed is notice under subsection 1 of section 73 shall be issued at least, and mark the word at least 3 months prior to the time limit specified in subsection 10 for the issuance of order. I beg the typographical error. By the way, friends, I just forgot to mention that this PPT will be with you through the association after maybe on Monday or next week. So one need not really bother about writing down anything. No need to take the snap or anything. Don't waste your time. This entire PPT, I will just fine tune it also if there are any minor corrections or not. This PPT and tomorrow's PPT, both PPT will be with you through the association. So how the normal period of limitation is to be counted. And this is a very, roundabout manner of counting the normal period. It says it should be issued at least 3 months prior to the time limit for the issue of the order which is specified under subsection 10. What does subsection 10 says? Proper officer shall issue the order under subsection 9, that is adjudication order, within 3 years from the due date for furnishing of annual return for the financial year to which the demand or erroneous refund relates. In other words, there is a time limit specified for the issue of the order, and that order has to be passed within 3 years from the due date, and mind you, not furnishing of the annual return, from the due date for furnishing of annual return for the financial year, and before expiry of 3 years, which is 36 months. In other words, in 2017-18, within 33 months, before the expiry of 33 months, a so-called notice under section 73 will have to be issued by the proper officer. I'll try to explain to you this by a table. Next. If you see status of limitation period as of now, relevant financial year, suppose the demand relates to the 2017-18. What was the due date? This is the extended due date, not the original due date. An extended due date will be the relevant date. Extended due date is 5th February 2020 for the category A states and 7th February 2020 for the category B states. This is the due date for furnishing the AR1, that is from GSTR 9. And from here, one has to count 33 months, which would expire on 5/11/2022. In other words, for 2017-18, a taxpayer can get the show cause notice for normal period right up to 11/2022, November 2022, practically more than 5 years. And 5 years is the extended period of limitation. Please understand that, where there is a fraud or suppression involved. Here, normal period of limitation itself has got stretched to 5 years effectively. Why? I will discuss this later on. So this is today, and this applies to every taxpayers, and with due respect, even the chartered accountants and even the tax practitioners and other professionals. We have this hanging sword right up to November 22 for the demand for any reason for the first financial year 17-18 after introduction of the GST, of the introduction of the GST. Similarly, 18-19, the due date for furnishing AR9, GSTR 9 was 31st/12/2020. And from there, one has to compute 33 months. Again, from 1920, the due date just went March 2021, and the last date will be 12/2023. So for 1920, right up to December 23, the demand. Mr. Swapnil,
Yes, sir.
yeah, if there are questions which are getting flashed on the screen, I don't mind. I can take it also. I'm
Yes.
unable to see the questions.
Yeah, you can see that question in Q&A check box.
Yeah, 1 second.
So scroll down to recent ones.
Okay. Or maybe let it flash on the screen. I don't mind it. Next.
Okay, sir. Continue.
Next. Coming to show cause notice for extended period of limitation. When does the extended period of limitation come into play? Extended period of limitation will come into play when there exists the ingredients of fraud, willful misstatement, or suppression of facts with an intent to evade payment of tax. And in that case, the time limit again will have to be computed on the basis of what is the time limit specified for the purpose of passing the order by the authority under the law. Subsection 10 of section 74 says that the proper officer shall pass the adjudication order in terms of subsection 9 within a period of 5 years from the due date for furnishing of annual return, to which the demand or erroneous refund relates. Next. Therefore, if any tax has not been paid or short paid, or refund has been fraudulently obtained, or ITC is fraudulently availed, or ITC is fraudulently utilized by suppressing certain facts, either fraudulently or otherwise, then the extended period of 5 years will come into play, and that 5-year period will have to be computed with reference to the last date specified for the purpose of passing the adjudication order by the proper officer. And in this case, under section 74, for the 17-18, the demand under extended period can come right up to right in August 2024 if there is a fraud or willful suppression. In 18-19, it can come till June 25 because it is to be issued before 6 months. So 5 years is 60 months. 54 months are given from the due date for furnishing the return to the proper officer for issuing the demand. 54 months. Normal period under section 73, 33 months. 1920, it is September 2025. Next. And here comes the very unique presentation of the limitation period. Friends, if you compare the current section 73 and 74, which are basically divided into two separate sections, which were earlier covered under the same section 73 of Finance Act 1994 relating to service tax and section 11A of the Central Excise Act. Both the normal period of limitation and extended period of limitation related provisions were covered under the same section. Here under GST, they are divided into two independent parts. for the purpose of clarity and simplicity. That's fine. But under Section 73 of Finance Act relating to service tax and Section 11A, at least under 11A, right from 1944 till it was practically relegated to the history on 30th June 2017. Section 11A, the date of issue of SOCOS notice, time limit has always been based on the relevant date. Even under customs today, the time limit, Section 28, is based on the relevant date. And the relevant date is actually was defined under Section 11A. Similarly, in service tax also, the relevant date has been defined very clearly. And it is mainly linked to the date of filing of the monthly return, in service tax half-yearly return. And if that return is not filed, then the last date on which the return ought to have been filed. These are the two major dates. Then there are other alternative options also to determine the relevant date. However, while the current Section 73 and 74 of CGST Act are entirely patterned on the erstwhile 11A and 73, the concept of relevant date has been very quietly buried. And the time limit for issue of the SOCOS notice under both the provisions has been linked to the last date for the issuance of the order, which in turn is based upon the due date for furnishing the annual return. And this is the legacy of the VAT regime. It is because this concept or practice was prevalent and recognized under the VAT laws, and here it is now adopted very quietly without anybody really noticing it, the harmful effect, the serious impact it can have, and it has been, and one really fails to understand. And here I would like the association to make a note of this. Apart from the unreasonably long period given to for the purpose of raising the demand, at least under normal period, why the time limit should be linked to the date of passing of the order by the officer? Why can't it be linked to the monthly return or quarterly return? There is no need to even link it to the annual return. It has to be, because my monthly return or quarterly return provide all the details necessary to the jurisdictional officer, based on which he can definitely unearth if there is any loss of the revenue on any count whatsoever. Why should it be linked to the annual return, which practically extend the time limit by 1 year initially? So this is one aspect which should be seriously taken. The another point is the proper officer discretionary power to issue. I'm sure quite a few of you might have come across this practice from under the VAT regime from the state VAT authorities. The word used is at least before the 3 months or at least before the 6 months. On the other hand, the officer has to pass the order within 60 months in case of under Section 74, and within 36 months in case of Section 73. Nothing stops from him. If you just go to the previous table, please, previous slide. Previous slide. Yes. Let us take the case of 1718. He is supposed to issue the notice if he is going to, if he is alleging the suppression against the taxpayer, he can issue the notice till 5th August 2024. Nothing stops him from issuing the notice on the last day, 5th August 2024, because he has to pass the order by another 6 months, the time limit which expires, and nothing stops him doing that. And he gives hardly 6 months. In case of normal period, the taxpayer hardly gets 3 months for responding to the SOCOS notice. And particularly, as our experience shows, particularly in suppression cases, it is not really easy to prepare the defense within a short period. Sometimes it may have to be, a lot of things may have to be done. And the taxpayer can always be on its, the tenter hooks. At the last minute, the notice is issued, and then he passes the order. So to safeguard against this aspect may have to be very seriously considered and may have to be taken up. Next. Then here comes another point. Why this time limit got extended 17, 18 right up to 22 and 23 and 24? Friends, I'm very sorry to say, we ourselves have actually invited these troubles for ourselves as a professionals, by continuously seeking the extension of the filing of the AR return in form GSTR 9. Whatever may be the reasons, the causes may be justified during COVID and maybe before COVID also. I'm not talking about the justifiability of the need for the extension. It is the manner in which the extension is sought that is something one may have to have a second thought now in future. We could have achieved the same result by asking for the waiver of the late fee by freezing the due date for furnishing the annual return in form 9, GSTR 9. We could have always asked for the levy waiver of the penalty and the waiver of late fee. There are umpteen number of cases where by extending the date, the waiver is granted and thereby effectively the date is granted. Even the last month COVID-related relaxation also are on the same line. Why should we ask for the extension of due date? We should have asked, and we must ask only for the waiver of late fee if the annual return is filed by certain date. Because of this extension of due date, the date for issue of the so-called notice under section 73 and 74 has already got extended without anybody noticing this. And this is the hanging sword which we will now carry on our head forever. So maybe in future, if any such need arises, maybe we would be more careful. Next. Invocation of extended period under section 74 only if the ingredient of fraud or willful misstatement or willful suppression of facts exists. These are the same expression you would find under erstwhile section 11A and the section 73 of the Finance Act. The question here is that there are two more expressions which were used under the erstwhile provisions: willful misdeclaration and collusion. Both these expressions now do not find mention in the present section 73 and section 74. They do not find the mention. Maybe the legislature felt that the willful suppression or willful misstatement coupled with fraud are enough to cover willful misdeclaration and collusion. Collusion is basically the two persons joining together and two or more persons joining hands together to defraud the revenue. That collusion is missing. Sometimes the collusion can be between the officer of the department and the taxpayer also. It is not uncommon. Now collusion word is no longer there. Next. What is fraud? And here the normal. Please understand, the fundamentally invocation of extended period of limitation will be available to the department only and only if there is a fraud or willful suppression or willful misstatement with an intent to evade payment of tax. Let us take the case of fraud. Fraud has been defined. I'm not reading this Johnson and versus McDonald Black's Law Dictionary, this definition, but in another definition says it is a federal offense of willfully attempting to evade or defeat the payment of taxes due or owing. In one of the celebrity cases on fraud is by the, in the case of the Cosmic Dye Chemical, Supreme Court. And in this case, Supreme Court has said that the positive intent to defraud the revenue is always present in the word fraud. Fraud postulates a positive intent to defraud the revenue. And then it says that fraud and collusion, both, it is evident that the intent to evade duty is built into these very words. In case of misstatement or suppression, it is marked because the language is the same. Section 73 or 74 language is the same as is under section 11 and 73. For the willful misstatement and suppression of facts, the Supreme Court said in Cosmic Dye that they are clearly qualified by the word willful, both suppression and misstatement. And therefore, this means there has to be an intent to evade payment of tax or duty. There has to be a mens rea. There has to be a guilty mind. And the court in Cosmic Dye further made one very pertinent observation that there cannot be a suppression or misstatement of fact which is not willful and yet constitute a permissible ground for the purported invocation of the proviso to section 11A. Mark the words of Supreme Court. that there cannot be a case where there is a suppression or misstatement which is not willful or deliberate or intentional, but still the extended period is invocable. Both cannot go together. Department cannot blow high or blow cold. That yes, there is no suppression, but still we will invoke the extended period of limitation because you have not declared something. There is no willful suppression, but there is a suppression. Both cannot do together. In Jain Sudh Vanaspati, Supreme Court said that fraud unravels everything if established. Once the fraud is established, it nullifies, vitiates everything. Jagdish Cancer Society and other such hospital cases, Supreme Court has said in the context of Customs Act, the same, that fraud vitiates everything. This is the same view, same judgment, and the recent judgment of the Mumbai High Court, even in SL Propek. Next. What is willful misstatement or suppression of facts? And here, I'll just start with, and friends, these are the fundamental principles which would govern the GST laws also. When we are facing or we are defending that there is no suppression and therefore the demand is time barred. All this discussion becomes necessary when, apart from the merits of the case, when the taxpayer, we are fighting the case also on the time bar, that even though the department, whatever demand is raised may be correct, basic differential amount of tax on account of classification, valuation or exemption, it might be correct, but without prejudice to that, the demand is time barred. This is what when we say that all these judgments become relevant when the department has invoked the extended period of limitation. In Padmini products, Supreme Court says in the context of section 11A that the expression suppression of fact has been used in company of such strong words as fraud, collusion or willful default. At least fraud is available under current section 74. In fact, it is the mildest expression used in the proviso. Yet the surrounding with which it has been used, it has to be construed strictly. It does not mean any omission. The act must be deliberate. A mere omission is not sufficient. In taxation, it can have only one meaning, that the correct information was not disclosed deliberately to escape from the payment of tax. Where facts are known to both the parties, the omission by one to do what he might have done and not that he must have done does not render it suppression. These are the celebratory observations of the Supreme Court in Padmini products, and even in the Kemphar liniments case also, the Supreme Court has held the same thing, and Supreme Court said in Kemphar case that in order to make a demand for the larger period of limitation, then something positive other than mere inaction or failure on the part of the manufacturer or producer or conscious or deliberate withholding of information when the manufacturer knew otherwise is required to be established. Where department had full knowledge about the facts and the manufacturer's action or inaction is based on their belief that they were required or not required to carry out such action or inaction, the period beyond 6 months in the context of section 73, it is 3 years, cannot be made applicable. The similar observations have been made and these judgments have been followed in Pushpam Pharmaceutical, Continental Foundation, Stone and Webster, Lubricant Limited, then Uniworth, Northern Plastic. There are huge number of, catena of decision of Supreme Court, not to talk about High Court and Tribunal, which says that mere misstatement or mere failure on part of the taxpayer to declare something or disclose something will not amount to suppression, but such non-disclosure should be with a willful intention to evade payment of tax. And in other words, as I normally like to put it, to explain it in other words, the sum and substance of the principle laid down in all these judgments is that the person concerned should have either disclosed something which is not true or correct, or he has failed to disclose something which he is required in law to declare. In first case, there is a commission of an act. He is declaring something, but which is incomplete or untrue. In another case, he is not disclosing or declaring something which he is required to disclose under law. Then that is an omission of an act. And in both these cases, the commission or omission of an act should be guided by his intention to evade the payment of tax or duty. It is then and then only the extended period of limitation will come into play. Otherwise, not. Next.